My name is Jessica Gavin, and my thesis proposal is on exceptional student education. How can teachers be better prepared? The overview for this is in 1975, the Education for All Handicapped Children was signed into law, allowing all students to have a free and appropriate public education. It was updated in 2004 and was now known as Individuals with Disability Education Act. It includes FAPE, which is Free and Appropriate Public Education, and Least Restrictive Environment. This means that general education classrooms are getting more and more students with learning disabilities, physical disabilities, some even cognitive and behavioral disabilities, because that is the placement that the IEP team feels is appropriate for each student. After this law was signed into effect, teachers started receiving more ESE students every day, every year, every week. The purpose of this study is to determine if teacher preparation programs and continuing professional development are effective to help teachers know strategies and learn things they can do to teach and help students with disabilities. The secondary purpose is to determine current teachers' needs. What do they think that is lacking? What do they think would help them be able to educate all students? The problem for this thesis is that the last few years there's been an increase in mainstreaming students, which means that more ESE students are going out into general education classrooms instead of in self-contained classrooms where they had previously been. And general education teachers now need to be specialists when it comes to teaching ESE students, even if they've had no training, they have no professional development, they've had no pre-service programs. They just are expected to know what they need to do. Research question: how can general education teachers be better prepared in pre-service courses, and how can current educators receive continuing professional development to better serve students with disabilities? Okay, these are some definitions of terms. These are important to know that most people don't know off the top of your head. When you're in a meeting, you'll hear abbreviations for everything, and you'll be like, what is that? These are some of those terms that you should get to know. IEP is an individual education plan for the student that has their accommodations, modifications, any services they get, whether it's occupational therapy, physical therapy, that'll all be in that IEP plan that you will have a copy of and access to for every student that has one. General education teacher, those are the teachers that are outside in the regular setting classroom. General education, everybody's there. Special education teachers, those are the ESE teachers. That's what you hear, ESE or VE, varying exception ability. They're the resource teachers. There are some self-contained teachers still, inclusion teachers. Resource is where the student comes into the classroom for part of the day. Inclusion is where the teacher, the ESE teacher, travels to the general education classroom and helps the student with his accommodations and modifications. Students with disabilities, SWD, and ESE student, exceptional student education, are used interchangeably. Sometimes you'll see SWD, sometimes you'll see ESE. It just depends on what document it is on. Access points. Access points are a curriculum like Florida standards. They are Florida access points. It is just the meat of the standard that is for 2% or less of the ESE population of students. Those are for students with severe cognitive disabilities. Modifications. Modifications are when the curriculum is modified to meet the student's needs. This generally doesn't happen with a lot of students in ESE, but it can happen if they need Braille, if that's their only modification. Braille could be a modification. If they need larger text, that's a modification. Accommodations. These are the changes made to the setting or presentation. So if a child has to sit in front of you, near you, if they need their work chunked into smaller parts, those are all accommodations. Okay, the literature review. There have been many studies on inclusion, ESE classrooms, ESE students in the general classroom, and it all points to the teacher's attitude toward accepting the ESE students into their general education classroom is not really good. All the studies, like the static study that was done in 2012, the one by Swanson-Gerkel in 2013, they all, how teachers felt about having ESE students in their classroom, they did not feel like they knew what they needed to do. And they did not feel like they had enough training or professional development before they took the student on in order to help them learn their best, in order to help them know what they were doing, in order to meet their needs. Pre-service teacher training on inclusion. There were 3 studies done in this, one in the United States, one in United Kingdom, and one in South Africa. The study from South Africa, the teachers there were required to have not only a field studies course in special education, they were required to have a whole semester of internship as well in a special education classroom. It could have been a self-contained, a resource, or an inclusion classroom, but as long as they were following and shadowing that teacher, then they got to learn more strategies to help those ESE students while they were going into the general education classroom. The studies in the United States on pre-service teaching showed that most of the courses that are required is just one course. It's a semester long, and you should get all your information then. There is no requirement for an ESE classroom. There is no requirement for an ESE field study or an ESE internship in the studies that were done for the United States. Continuing professional development on inclusion. The studies show that teachers would go to professional development for inclusion and ESE students if it was offered at a time that was convenient for them. The teachers from the studies all decided that the information that came back from the studies was that teachers did not have access to enough professional development on ESE students, ESE strategies, ESE learning, and they would be happy to go to it. It just did not fit into their time frame. They had to take off of work in order to do it, or they had to travel more than an hour to complete the information. One of the studies showed was that teachers would prefer for it to be at their school. That way everyone at the school had to take the same professional development, and everyone at the school understood the same thing, and there wasn't somebody that took it and then came back and told you something, and then that was not the right thing, and then something else changed. They would like for everybody to take the same professional development at their school site on a teacher work day in order for everybody to be on the same page. Instructional leaders' knowledge of inclusion. The two studies that I read on instructional leaders and inclusion, they showed that how the instructional leader feels about ESC students is how the teacher feels about ESC students. If the leaders, administrators, principals, deans, if they're just like, okay, just deal with this, we just have to put up with it, then the teachers become less accepting of those students because they know they're not going to get the help and support that they need, especially in the cases that were behavior related and they were out in the general education classroom. So the study suggested that there be specific professional development for leaders in order for them to understand what was expected of the school in an inclusive setting. Okay, the theory that I found most accepting for our teachers trained to handle ESC students is inclusive special education is about providing the best possible instruction for all children with special educational needs. That's what SEND means. In the most appropriate setting throughout all stages of a child's education with the aim of achieving the highest possible level of inclusion in the community post-school. So this means that we want them to be productive members of society, that we need to train them in order to carry on throughout their school years. The inclusive education they're talking about does not necessarily mean that everybody is out in a general education classroom. It does not say that. It says what is best for the student. For some students, that still does mean a self-contained classroom. For some students, that means that they go out and try to be mainstreamed instead of being stuck in one class all day long. Okay, I used a mixed method approach to gather, I will be using a mixed method approach to gather data and surveys as well as interviews. The research design, the first step, I will send out an email to teachers in the school board with a survey that will come back to me, and I will choose 48 qualified participants. Then I will notify the participants that they have been selected. They will be given their participant number. We will schedule our first meeting, get to know you, go over the rules of the study, go over what is required. The second interview will be to review courses offered and needs not met there, as well as professional development offered, if it was helpful or not, what would you like to see? Excuse me. Then we'll analyze the data. In the final interview, I'll share the results of the data with the participants and see if they have any further questions, answers, comments. Okay, the sample selection. All right, this is going to be 20 general ed teachers, 20 special ed teachers, 10 that have a degree in education, 10 that went through an educational preparation institute after they received a degree in another field. I would like all participants to be teaching less than 10 years. That way it's recent. What happened to them in their program is recent and not 20 or 30 years ago. Participants will be chosen at randomly based on the responses to their survey questions. The time frame of this study is going to be 3 months. I think that it's going to take that long to get all the interviews done, to analyze the data, to get the surveys done, to choose people, to meet with them. Teachers have a busy life. Sometimes they can't meet when you need to meet. And you never know what's going to happen. So I figured 3 months would be plenty of time to get this done. Okay, data collection. I'm going to collect data in multiple steps at each interview. There'll be questions and answers. There will also be a follow-up survey based on the